The emergency board meeting was supposed to be about quarterly earnings. Instead, every executive in Hartwell Technologies' glass-walled conference room stood frozen, watching the impossible unfold on the security monitors. Their CEO's infamous Rottweiler, the 130-pound beast that had hospitalized 2 security guards and terrified an entire corporate campus, was sitting calmly in the maintenance corridor. And kneeling beside him, scratching behind his ears like he was a golden retriever, was Amy Adams, the night janitor. The woman they'd all walked past for 3 years without a second glance. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was the way the dog looked at her. Like she was his entire world. Like he'd been waiting his whole life for her to walk through that door. CEO Richard Hartwell watched from his office, his hand moving toward the phone to call security. His assistant stood beside him, pale and trembling, certain they were about to witness a mauling. And Amy, staring at the scars covering the Rottweiler's body, made a choice that would either get her killed or change everything. She opened her mouth and whispered a name she hadn't spoken in 12 years. Bruno? Let me take you back to where this really started. Not in that corridor, but in a cramped apartment in Queens, where a 28-year-old woman was learning that being invisible was its own kind of survival. Amy Adams had perfected the art of disappearing. She wore the same 3 gray janitorial uniforms, kept her hair in a tight bun, and had mastered the exact posture that made wealthy people look right through her. She cleaned their offices at Hartwell Technologies from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., emptying trash cans filled with half-eaten lunches that cost more than her weekly grocery budget, wiping down desks where million-dollar deals were made, and vacuuming around the feet of security guards who never bothered learning her name. "Morning, cleaning lady," they'd say. If they acknowledged her at all. Amy never corrected them. Never said, "It's Amy." Never mentioned that she had a bachelor's degree in computer science from a state school, or that she'd once dreamed of working in tech before life taught her that dreams were luxuries people like her couldn't afford. The night shift paid $15.50 an hour. With overtime, she cleared about $35,000 a year. It was exactly enough to cover her studio apartment, her younger sister's college textbooks, and the monthly payment on medical debt from her mother's final hospital stay. There was nothing left over for classes, career changes, or hope. But here's what the executives in their corner offices never understood: invisible women see everything. Amy knew which VP was having an affair because she'd found the hotel receipts in his trash. She knew which department was getting cut because she'd vacuumed around the leaked memo. She knew the CEO's schedule better than his own assistant because she cleaned his office every night at 2 a.m., when he was still there, working, never once looking up from his computer to see her. Richard Hartwell. 42, self-made tech billionaire, famous for his ruthless business tactics and his equally ruthless dog. Everyone called him brilliant. Everyone called him untouchable. Amy called him lonely, but only in her head, because sharing observations was a luxury invisible women also couldn't afford. The first time she saw Bruno was during her 3rd week on the job. She'd been cleaning the executive floor when she heard growling from Hartwell's private office. Deep, guttural, promising violence. The kind of sound that made your DNA scream run. "Don't go near that door," the night security guard warned. Mr. Hartwell's dog. "Thing's a monster. Sent 2 guys to the ER last month." Amy had frozen, her hand on her cleaning cart, and for just a moment, one breathless, impossible moment, she'd heard something beneath the growling. A whimper. The kind of sound an animal makes when it's scared and hurting and trying desperately to hide it. But she'd walked away. Because that's what invisible women do. They survive by not getting involved. That lasted exactly 5 weeks. It was a Thursday night, technically Friday morning at 3:17 a.m., when Amy heard the crash. She was cleaning the break room on the executive floor, and the sound of shattering glass came from Hartwell's office, followed by that bone-deep growling and a man's sharp curse. "God damn it, Bruno. Enough." More crashing. The sound of furniture scraping. And then, cutting through everything else, a yelp of pain that made Amy's chest constrict. Her hand was on the office door before logic could stop her. The scene inside looked like a war zone. Overturned chairs, scattered papers, a broken lamp, and in the corner, Richard Hartwell bleeding from his forearm while a massive Rottweiler cowered under the desk. Not attacking. Not aggressive. Cowering. Get out, Hartwell snapped when he saw Amy. This isn't your concern. But Amy wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the dog, at the way he was trembling, at the scars crisscrossing his body, at the way he was pressing himself into the smallest possible space like he was trying to disappear. She knew that posture. She lived that posture. He's terrified, Amy said quietly. He's dangerous, Hartwell corrected, wrapping his bleeding arm with his tie. I'm calling animal control. He's done. No. The word came out before Amy could stop it. Hartwell's head snapped up. Excuse me? And here's where Amy Adams made the first of many decisions that would completely upend her carefully invisible life. You're scaring him, she said, her voice steadier now. Look at his body language. He's not being aggressive. He's having a panic attack. Panic attack, Hartwell repeated flatly. It's a dog, not a therapy patient. He's a traumatized animal, Amy countered. She set down her cleaning supplies and slowly, carefully, lowered herself to the floor. Every instinct screamed that she was about to get fired, or worse, but she kept her eyes on the Rottweiler. And you're looming over him, cornering him, giving him no escape route. You're triggering his fight-or-flight response. How do you know that? Hartwell demanded. Because I volunteered at an animal shelter through college, Amy said, inching closer to the desk. Before my mom got sick and I had to, she cut herself off. He didn't need her life story. I know scared dogs. And I know this one isn't trying to hurt you. He's trying to survive you. The Rottweiler's eyes locked on Amy. In them, she saw something that made her heart break and burn simultaneously, recognition. Not of her specifically, but of what she represented. Another broken thing trying to take up less space. Bruno, Amy whispered, testing the name Hartwell had used. Hey, baby. It's okay. You're okay. He doesn't respond to gentle, Hartwell said, but his voice had lost its sharp edge. I've had 3 professional trainers try. He bit all of them. Maybe they were training him wrong. Amy extended her hand, palm down, letting the dog catch her scent. Maybe what he needed wasn't dominance. Maybe he just needed someone to understand. She started humming. Not a lullaby this time, but something older, deeper. A melody her grandmother used to sing when Amy was small and scared after her father left. A tune that promised safety even when the world wasn't safe at all. What happened next would become corporate legend. The Rottweiler, this supposedly vicious beast, this animal that had terrorized an entire office building, slowly crawled out from under the desk. His massive head lowered, ears back, everything about him screaming submission and desperate hope. When he reached Amy, he collapsed into her lap, all 130 pounds, and released a sound somewhere between a whine and a sob. Amy's arms wrapped around him, and she felt scars under her fingers. Too many scars. Old burns, healed fractures, the unmistakable marks of systematic abuse. Where did you get him? Amy asked, her voice tight with restrained fury. A breeder, Hartwell said quietly. He was still standing, still bleeding, but something in his expression had cracked open. Supposedly trained for executive protection. But he's been unmanageable since day one. He wasn't bred, Amy said flatly. He was made. Someone hurt him badly enough to break him, and then sold him to you as a weapon. The accusation hung in the air. Hartwell could have fired her. Should have fired her for speaking to him like that. Instead, he did something that shocked them both. He sat down on the floor beside her. You're the janitor, he said, and it wasn't quite a question. Amy, she corrected, meeting his eyes for the first time. My name is Amy Adams, and I've worked here for 3 years. And yes, before you ask, I see the irony of having the same name as a famous actress while cleaning your toilets. A ghost of a smile crossed Hartwell's face. Amy Adams, the janitor who speaks her mind and apparently performs miracles with traumatized dogs. No miracle, Amy said, her hand still moving over Bruno's scarred body, checking for fresh injuries. Just basic empathy. Something I'm guessing doesn't get much traction in corporate America. You'd be right. Hartwell studied her with unsettling intensity. What did you study in college? Amy stiffened. That's not relevant. Humor me. Computer science. Not that it matters now. The bitterness leaked through despite her best efforts. Why doesn't it matter? Because life happened, Amy said shortly. My mom got cancer my senior year. Medical bills. I dropped out to work. She died anyway. And here I am, living the dream at $15.50 an hour. The silence that followed was the kind where everything changes. How much do animal behaviorists make? Hartwell asked suddenly. Amy blinked. What? Professional dog trainers, behaviorists, the people who rehabilitate animals like Bruno. How much do they charge? $75 to $150 an hour, depending on expertise, Amy answered automatically. Why? Hartwell stood, moving to his desk with controlled precision. Because I'm offering you a job. $80,000 a year, full benefits, and your only responsibility is Bruno. You figure out what's wrong with him. You fix him. You make him feel safe. Amy's world tilted. $80,000? Plus overtime if needed. And if you succeed, if you transform him into a stable, functional animal, I'll triple it. Hartwell's gaze was sharp, calculating. But I have conditions. You move into the staff apartment on the executive floor. You're available 24/7. And you prove to me that dropping out of college wasn't wasted potential but delayed manifestation. Why? Amy whispered. Why would you do this? Hartwell looked at Bruno, still trembling in Amy's arms, and something raw flickered across his face. Because watching you with him reminded me why I built this company in the first place. Not to accumulate power, but to solve problems everyone else said were unsolvable. You looked at a violent dog and saw trauma. Everyone else saw a liability. That's the kind of thinking I need. He extended his hand. Do we have a deal? Amy looked down at Bruno, at this broken thing that had found her in his darkest moment. She thought about her studio apartment, her sister's tuition, the dreams she'd buried under layers of survival. And she thought, maybe being invisible wasn't survival. Maybe it was just slower dying. Deal, Amy said, taking his hand. But I have one condition of my own. Hartwell raised an eyebrow. Ambitious already. Go ahead. When I fix him, not if, when, you let Bruno choose what happens next. Not you, not me. We give him agency. He decides if he stays, if he works, if he's a pet or a protector. His trauma, his choice. For the first time since Amy had entered his office, Richard Hartwell smiled fully. You know, Ms. Adams, I think you're going to be far more dangerous than I anticipated. Good, Amy replied, steel entering her voice. I'm tired of being safe. The staff apartment was larger than any place Amy had ever lived. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a bedroom with an actual walk-in closet, a kitchen with appliances that weren't held together by prayer and duct tape. It felt like a museum dedicated to wealth she'd never touch. Yours for as long as you work here, the HR director said, handing over the keys. Mr. Hartwell has also arranged for a wardrobe update. The stylist will arrive tomorrow. Amy waited until she was alone before she let herself break down. Not from sadness, but from the sheer overwhelming terror of hope. Because hope meant you had something to lose again. Bruno patted over, resting his massive head on her knee. In his dark eyes, she saw the same fear reflected back at her. "We're a mess, aren't we?" Amy whispered, scratching behind his ears. "Two broken things pretending we know what we're doing." But Bruno's tail wagged. Just slightly. Just enough. The first 3 weeks were brutal. Amy researched trauma responses in dogs, consulted with veterinary behaviorists, and spent 18-hour days working with Bruno. Teaching him that touch didn't mean pain. That raised voices weren't preludes to violence. That the world could be safe if you found the right people. She also discovered something unexpected: Richard Hartwell was always there. Working late in his office, checking on their progress, asking questions that revealed genuine curiosity rather than mere investment protection. "Why does he still flinch when I move too fast?" Hartwell asked one night, watching from the doorway as Amy worked with Bruno. "Because you're tall, male, and powerful," Amy said bluntly. Everything his abusers were. "It's not personal. It's survival instinct." "How do I fix it?" Amy looked up at him, this billionaire CEO asking her, a former janitor, for guidance. "You earn it. Slowly. Consistently. You prove you're different." Hartwell absorbed this. "Like you did." "I wasn't his abuser," Amy corrected. "I was just another broken thing." He recognized the kinship. "Are you broken, Amy?" The question was too intimate, too real. Amy deflected with a half-truth. "We're all broken, Mr. Hartwell. The question is whether we're broken enough to see it in others." But that night, alone in her apartment with Bruno sleeping beside her bed, Amy let herself remember. Her father leaving when she was 8. Her mother working 3 jobs and still never having enough. Scholarships and student loans and the impossible dream of escaping poverty through education. Meeting a boy her junior year who said he loved her, who left the moment her mom got sick because he couldn't handle the drama. Dropping out 3 credits short of her degree because someone had to pay the medical bills. Watching her mother die anyway, drowning in debt for a battle they'd already lost. Becoming invisible because visible meant vulnerable. And now, somehow, impossibly, she was here. In a luxury apartment, making more money than she'd ever imagined, working with a traumatized Rottweiler for a billionaire who looked at her like she mattered. It was terrifying. The turning point came 6 weeks into Amy's new role. She was in Hartwell's office, Bruno now comfortable enough to lie at her feet while she worked on behavioral plans, when the door burst open. A man in an expensive suit stormed in, flanked by 2 others who radiated corporate menace. "Richard, we need to talk about the Reynolds acquisition," the man said, not acknowledging Amy's presence. "They're refusing our terms." "Then we adjust our approach," Hartwell replied calmly. "Or we crush them," the man countered. "Show them what happens when they refuse Hartwell Technologies." Bruno's head lifted. A low growl building in his chest. "Marcus, leave," Hartwell said quietly, his eyes on the dog. "We're in the middle of leave. Now." The men retreated, confused and angry. The moment the door closed, Bruno relaxed. He sensed aggression, Amy observed. "He was protecting you." "From my own CFO," Hartwell said, something like wonder in his voice. "He's never done that before." "Because before, he was a weapon you couldn't control," Amy said, moving to Bruno's side. "Now he's a companion choosing to protect what matters to him. There's a difference." Hartwell looked at her for a long moment. "You're not just training him, are you? You're teaching me." "You hired me to fix a broken dog," Amy replied, her heart hammering. "Turns out, I'm better at fixing broken systems." That night, Hartwell asked Amy to join him for dinner. Not a meeting. Not a professional consultation. Dinner. "This is inappropriate," Amy said, even as she agreed. "Probably," Hartwell admitted. "But watching you transform Bruno, watching you speak truth to power without flinching, I realized something. I've spent 20 years building an empire, and the only honest interaction I have is with a janitor-turned-dog trainer who isn't afraid to tell me I'm wrong. They ate takeout in his office, because billionaires apparently also craved terrible Chinese food at midnight, and talked. Really talked. About his childhood in foster care, about building his company from nothing, about the loneliness that came with success. Everyone wants something from me, Hartwell said quietly. Money, access, power. But you wanted nothing. You just saw a scared dog and decided to help. I saw myself, Amy corrected. Bruno was just honest about his fear. I spent years hiding mine. What are you afraid of? Amy set down her chopsticks. That this is temporary. That I'll wake up back in my studio apartment, cleaning offices, wondering if I imagined being someone who mattered. Hartwell's hand covered hers. You matter, Amy. You've always mattered. The world just wasn't paying attention. The kiss that followed was inevitable and impossible and changed everything. 3 months later, Amy had become indispensable. Not just to Bruno, but to the entire company. She'd started consulting on workplace culture, applying animal behavioral psychology to human dynamics. Her insights on creating safe, trusting environments revolutionized Hartwell's management approach. And somewhere along the way, the CEO and the former janitor fell irrevocably in love. This is a terrible idea, Amy said, tangled in Hartwell's sheets, Bruno snoring at the foot of the bed. Worst decision I've ever made, Hartwell agreed, kissing her shoulder. Right after hiring you, which was the best decision I've ever made. People will talk. Let them. His arms tightened around her. Amy, I've spent my entire life controlling narratives, managing perceptions, building walls so high no one could reach me. And then you walked through my door with your gray uniform and your refusal to be impressed, and every wall I built became irrelevant. That's the trauma bonding talking, Amy tried to joke. That's love talking, Hartwell corrected seriously. And I know it's complicated and problematic and probably textbook inappropriate workplace relationship. But I love you, Amy Adams. I love your mind, your courage, your ability to see what everyone else misses. I love that you're brave enough to be broken and brilliant simultaneously. Amy's eyes burned. I love you too. And yes, it's terrifying. Good, Hartwell whispered. Let's be terrified together. The crisis came 5 months into Amy's transformation of both Bruno and Hartwell Technologies. Marcus, the aggressive CFO, had been systematically undermining Hartwell's new management approach. The kinder, more empathetic company culture was being weaponized as weakness. And he wasn't working alone. Board meeting tomorrow, Hartwell told Amy grimly. Marcus is pushing for a vote of no confidence. Says I've lost my edge, that I'm being manipulated by, he cut himself off. By the janitor I'm sleeping with, Amy finished flatly. His words were cruder. Amy felt the old invisibility trying to reclaim her. The voice that said she didn't belong here, that this was always temporary, that she was foolish to believe she could be more than what poverty had prescribed. But then Bruno pushed his head into her lap, reminding her, transformation wasn't linear. It was fought for, daily, against every voice that said you weren't enough. Then let's fight back, Amy said, steel entering her voice. But not with his tactics. With truth. The board meeting was supposed to be Hartwell's execution. Instead, Amy walked in with a comprehensive presentation that left every board member speechless. She'd documented everything: productivity increases since implementing trauma-informed management, employee retention improvements, even revenue growth tied directly to healthier workplace culture. She'd turned her janitor's observations into quantifiable business strategy. For 3 years, I was invisible in this building, Amy said, facing the board with unwavering confidence. I saw everything because no one bothered seeing me. I watched talented employees quit because aggressive management broke them. I watched innovation die because fear doesn't inspire creativity. And I watched Richard Hartwell become the loneliest successful person I'd ever met. She pulled up her final slide. Marcus says empathy is weakness. I say trauma response disguised as strength is what's actually destroying this company. Richard didn't lose his edge. He found his humanity. And if you fire him for that, you deserve whatever corporate wasteland Marcus builds in his place. The vote was unanimous. Hartwell stayed. Marcus was gone by morning. 1 year later, Amy stood in front of 500 employees at Hartwell Technologies' annual gala. Bruno sat beside her in a bow tie, calm and confident and completely transformed. Richard watched from the side, his hand over his heart, his eyes bright with pride and love. Most of you know the story, Amy began. How a janitor saved the CEO's dangerous dog and somehow ended up here, as vice president of workplace culture. But what the company newsletter didn't tell you is what I learned from Bruno. She gestured to the Rottweiler, who had become the company's unofficial therapy dog, beloved by every employee. I learned that being broken isn't permanent. That trauma doesn't define you, it refines you. That the most dangerous thing you can do isn't fail, it's let fear convince you that you don't deserve to try. Her voice strengthened, reaching every woman in that room who'd ever felt invisible, overlooked, or less than. I learned that power isn't about dominance. It's about creating space for others to be powerful too. That leadership isn't commanding fear, it's earning trust. And that sometimes, the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to stay small when the world insists you should. Amy looked directly at the women in the audience, especially the custodial staff, the assistants, the administrative professionals everyone else overlooked. You are not invisible. You are not disposable. You are not the roles that pay your bills. You are brilliant, capable, and deserving of spaces that see your worth. And if those spaces don't exist yet? She smiled. Build them anyway. The applause was deafening. After the gala, Richard found Amy on the rooftop terrace, Bruno pressed against her legs, both of them looking out over Manhattan. I have something for you, Richard said, pulling out a small box. Amy's breath caught. Richard, Amy Adams, former janitor, current VP, future wife if you'll have me. He opened the box to reveal a ring that was beautiful without being ostentatious. Will you marry me? Not because I'm your boss, not because I need you, but because I choose you. Every single day, I choose you. Amy looked at this man who'd seen her when she was invisible. Who'd trusted her with his brokenness. Who'd built an empire and then let her teach him how to make it mean something. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times yes. Bruno barked his approval, tail wagging, and for the first time in her life, Amy Adams felt completely, perfectly seen. Epilogue: 2 years later, the Amy Adams Foundation for Professional Development opened in Queens, in a building that once housed the shelter where Amy had volunteered as a student. It offered free career counseling, skills training, and educational support for women rebuilding their lives after trauma, poverty, or loss. The keynote speaker at the opening ceremony was a former night janitor who'd become one of the most influential voices in corporate America. Someone once told me I was just a cleaning lady, Amy said, addressing a crowd of women who wore their struggles like armor. They were wrong. I was never just anything. Neither are you. Behind her, Richard held her hand while Bruno sat regally at her feet, proof that broken things could heal when given love, patience, and the revolutionary belief that they deserved better. We are janitors and waitresses and assistants and every role that society dismisses as less than. But we are also visionaries, strategists, leaders, and revolutionaries. Amy's voice rang with conviction. And the most dangerous thing we can do is finally believe it. The audience erupted. Among them, young women who'd grown up invisible, who'd been taught to shrink, who'd learned survival meant silence. They heard Amy's story and thought, maybe I could try. Maybe I deserve more. And in that maybe, everything changed. Because Amy Adams, the janitor who refused to stay invisible, had proven something revolutionary: transformation doesn't require permission. It requires courage, a willingness to be seen, and the radical belief that you deserve the space you take up. She'd walked into that building as someone society had written off. She'd walked out as someone who'd rewritten the rules entirely. And along the way, she'd saved a broken dog, transformed a lonely billionaire, and reminded an entire generation of overlooked women that their invisibility was never truth, it was just the world's failure of vision. Because here's what they never tell you about being underestimated: it gives you space to become exactly who you were always meant to be. And when you finally rise, when you finally claim your worth, the world has no choice but to pay attention. Amy Adams had paid attention to a scared dog when everyone else saw a monster. And in return, the universe finally paid attention to her. Sometimes, that's all transformation requires: one person brave enough to see what everyone else missed, including themselves.